In this Clair Obscur Expedition 33 guide, we're going to be taking a look at Maelle and how to use her in this game, what her mechanics are, including her stances, what they do exactly, how to get the most out of her skills, what are some good weapons to use for her, and what Pictos and Luminas you want to focus on when using her in the game. First of all, let me just say that Maelle is the highest potential DPS character in the game. She can deal insane amounts of damage, and even if you're not playing her perfectly, you're probably still out DPSing other characters in your group. But let's get into her mechanics and talk about stances a little bit first. So Maelle has 3 stances in the game, and she can also be stanceless. And when she starts combat, she's going to be stanceless. And by performing skills in combat, she will change stances. And the stance that she'll change into is dictated by the icon in the top right of the info box of the skill that you mouse over. So you can see it there. The stances are defensive stance, offensive stance, and virtuous stance. So defensive stance makes you take 50% less damage and also provides you with +1 AP, or whenever you parry or dodge, you usually get 1 anyway for parrying or dodging. So this would provide you 2 in each case, which is great for stacking up AP on the enemy's turn, and also, preventing damage with a 50% damage reduction, so that when it's your turn, you can, use another ability with a lots of AP cost and still have lots of health. The offensive stance increases your damage by 50%, but increases the damage you take by 50%. So ideally, you wouldn't end your turn in this stance, simply because you'll take more damage if you do, but it's a good idea to be in this stance before dealing damage with skills, because they'll be more effective. And lastly is Virtuose Stance. This is the best stance of Maelle. You want to try and be in this stance as much as possible, because it just provides 200% increase to the damage that you do with no negative downside. And keep in mind that this is going to apply to counterattacks that you do in combat as well, which is a good source of damage on Maelle. So if you can manage to get into Virtuose Stance and end your turn and then counterattack a couple times on the enemy's turn, you can often wipe out enemies or deal substantial damage to them before you even get to your turn. Now, unfortunately for Maelle, there are not a lot of skill ways to get into Virtuose Stance. There simply are only very few skills that will put you into this stance, and a lot of getting into this stance is relied on a single skill called Swift Stride. And essentially what this skill does is it deals a little bit of damage, but if you use it on a target that's burning, you will put yourself into Virtuose Stance. And Maelle has many skills that set burning, as do some other characters in the game. And because this is the primary method for her to getting into this stance, playing in a group that does the burning status effect is pretty much very important for Maelle, because you want her to be in this stance as much as possible. So ideally, in your party, you might have a character that goes before her, sets burning on a target, and then immediately on her turn, she uses Swift Stride and goes into Virtuose Stance. Maybe she gets a counterattack on her turn, or on the enemy turn, and she deals some damage to it, very high damage, and then when it's her turn, she can use a skill with plus 200% damage, which is great. However, there are other ways that she can get into this stance, and those predominantly come from weapons that she can acquire throughout the game. There are several weapons that will put her into Virtuose Stance if she destroys shields or counterattacks. There are various methods that will put her into this. Even one of them makes it so that she goes into Virtuose Stance if her health drops below 50%, which is never ideal, but does happen sometimes. So you might want to consider using one of these weapons, particularly the counterattack one, or one of the weapons that will put her into Virtuose Stance when counterattacking, because this is a great way for her to get into the stance during the enemy turn, so that on her turn she doesn't have to use Swift Stride with her turn, and she can use a skill that deals very high damage instead. So when you look through Maelle's skills, you'll notice almost immediately that most of her skills either deal fire damage and set burning, deal physical damage, or you use the weapon's element. Later on in the game, you will get some skills that do void damage, but early on, you're basically doing, whatever weapon element you have, or one of those 2 other damage types. So there's a couple ways that you can apply burn with Maelle. Spark is an easy one. This will hit once and apply 3 burn, and if you're in offensive stance when you do it, then it will apply 2 more burn, so you can get up to 5 burn in one go with this skill for very low AP cost, which is not bad early on in the game. Rain of Fire is also not a bad skill. This hits twice, applying 3 burn per hit, so 6 burn. And if you're in defensive stance when you use this, it'll apply 2 more burn per hit, up to 10 burn, which is even more burn than the previous skill, but it's a little bit more expensive. Another really good skill early on that doesn't do fire damage but relies on burn for its damage is Combustion. This actually deals physical damage in 2 hits, but it consumes up to 10 burn stacks for increased damage. And this thing hits like a truck from the early to mid game. It gets outpaced later on in the game by some of her other skills, but early to mid game, this thing can just absolutely annihilate enemies, particularly if they have more than 10 stacks of burn on them, or at least 10 stacks of burn, because it will only consume up to 10 stacks. Another interesting skill is the Mezzo Forte skill. This only costs 1 AP, and it reapplies your current stance and gives you more AP. This is a good way to gain some AP and stay in Virtuose Stance if you're already in it. That way you can counterattack for high damage on the enemy turn if you're familiar with their attack patterns. Or maybe you end up in Virtuose Stance from counterattacking on the enemy turn. You don't have enough AP for the skill that you want, but you don't want to lose Virtuose Stance. This is a good way to extend that so you can further pad your AP and then attack with something devastating next turn. Another really good skill early on that's outpaced later on is Fleurette Fury. This deals physical damage in 3 hits, but if you use it while you're in Virtuose Stance, you'll stay in Virtuose Stance. So this is a great way to maintain that stance on the enemy's turn so you can get those high counterattack damage. And it can also break enemies, and she has very few skills that can break enemies. So this is a good one to have for breaks and to remain in Virtuose Stance. And the last skill that I'll mention is a very important one called Breaking Rules. It doesn't deal very much damage, but what it allows Maelle to do is destroy all the shields and gain AP for the shields destroyed. So if you got an enemy that's got like 6 shields on it, 7 shields on it, you don't want to waste all your AP to gun through it. You just use this on them, and that's the end of their shields. And if that target is defenseless, they have that status effect, then she gets to go again. So this is a really strong skill for getting through the shields of enemies, which you will face throughout the game periodically. So taking a look at weapons, I highly recommend weapons that, again, get you into Virtuose Stance as often as possible. Typically, these are ones that, will apply to counterattacking, like Jerem is a good one for that. It allows you to switch to Virtuose Stance on counterattack. It also applies 5 burn on counterattack, which just benefits this playstyle tremendously, and also increases her counterattack damage per shield that she has. So if you have any Pictos or Luminas that provide shields to you, then she can increase her counterattack damage more. So this is a really strong weapon in my opinion. Lithium is also kind of another version of this. It switches to Virtuose Stance on counterattack. It also makes it so that when you're in Virtuose Stance, if you hit a marked enemy, it doesn't remove the mark. Marked enemies take more damage, so that's really strong. And it also provides her with 20% damage reduction when she switches out of this stance, like when she consumes it on a turn, goes back to some other stance based on the skill that she uses. So that's good for protecting her, after she uses the skill, which is quite nice as well. And the void damage on that weapon is also really strong. Another really good weapon is the Malarum weapon. This is a physical damage weapon, which is great. This is one of the better damage types in the game. It's resisted probably by the least amount of enemies besides void. It makes it so when she switches into Virtuose Stance, she heals her allies. So when you use Swift Stride, you'll heal each of them for 20% of their health, which is nice. And also she takes less damage when she's above 80% health. But if her health falls below 50%, she automatically goes into Virtuose Stance. This will happen to you, as you play the game and you're learning new enemies, and you're constantly learning new enemies in this game. So it's a good one, but level 20 means that you're not going to get that benefit till far on into the game. Sea Shellum is also a really strong weapon in my opinion. It has the fire element, which will make some of her weapons deal fire damage, which is great. It gives her +1 shield on switching to offensive stance, so any skill that puts her in offensive stance is going to provide her with a shield, which will prevent 1 instance of damage, which is nice. It also makes it so her base attack switches her to offensive stance, so if she does a base attack, she'll gain a shield as well, which is good. Maelle doesn't typically base attack, but if you knew you could gain a shield from doing it, you might consider doing it. Additionally, it makes it so she has a 50% critical chance when she's in offensive stance. This is really nice because it allows her to not have to stack up luck in order to get critical chance, or select Pictos that have high critical chance on them to have a very high critical chance. And obviously if you're using this weapon, you're going to want to prioritize being an offensive stance, maybe a little bit more than Virtuose Stance if you can. Still think you should probably be in Virtuose Stance as much as possible because your damage output will be higher, but if you can't, you definitely want to prioritize being an offensive stance. The Dunam ability is also quite good in my opinion. It makes it so that when you're in defensive stance, whenever you gain AP, you also give AP to allies. This can help, it's not going to benefit your own personal damage with Maelle, but it will help fuel them with AP so that they can use high AP skills on their turn, which will in turn increase your overall party damage, which is quite nice. Additionally, you'll gain +1 AP on stance switch. You normally gain 1 AP anyway, but now you'll gain more. So it should give you more AP overall in order to play with, which will make it so you can use your abilities more easily. Another great weapon for Maelle is the Metal M weapon. This allows her to begin combat in the Virtuose Stance, so her very first attack will be in this, which is great. It also makes it so that when she is in Virtuose Stance, every burn applied is doubled, so you can get even more burn stacks, and with the double burn Picto or Lumina, you can make that quadruple, which is really good. And it also makes it so her burn deals double damage when she's in this stance, so this is a really good weapon as well, and it's definitely one you should consider using. And then lastly, we'll take a look at Face Sum. This is another physical damage weapon, and it's absolutely deadly. First of all, when you're on offensive stance, you'll double the amount of burn applied with your abilities. So that's really huge. If you're going to do 20, then you do 40. There's also a Lumina in the game that doubles your burn amount. So if you're going to do 40, then you would do 80. That can allow you to stack up lots of burn in a hurry. And it also increases your burn damage by 50%. And it allows your base attack to spread your burn to a random enemy when you hit. And it will spread the amount of burn stacks. Like, I think it's either double the burn stacks they have on them or the amount of burn stacks they have on them. It's a lot, though. And if you have combo attack 1, combo attack 3 Luminas on Maelle, when you do that, it'll actually spread it around multiple times and do lots of burn damage. So this can be a really, really deadly weapon when used with lots of fire damage and fire burn stacking skills. So then when it comes to Luminas, as you might expect, you're going to be focusing on things that improve your effectiveness against burning enemies a lot. For instance, like Breaking Burn or Burning Affinity. Those can be good. Double Burn, Critical Burn. All of these things improve your effectiveness against burning enemies. And again, if you're using the last weapon, you'll want Combo Attack 1 and 2. And really, Maelle doesn't have a lot of problem with AP in my experience. Because she has so many ways to gain AP, she almost has full AP every turn. That may not be the case at the beginning of the game when you first start playing her, so you may want, you know, Energizing Start or Energizing Turn early on as well to help get her AP up. But at some point you'll realize that she's generating enough AP on her own that she does not need this, and you'll switch those out probably for some other things. Like, you can still have them, but you probably can back them down a bit, like you don't need all of them. And then, you know, she does have some skills that benefit from marking, which I didn't cover much in this video, but you could use marking shots to help mark enemies and then attack them. More effectiveness with skills, that's also a strategy. Generally speaking, you're going to want to focus on things that improve burn. So that wraps up my video on Maelle. I hope you guys found this one useful. She is absolutely devastating in combat. She basically carried me through the entire game. You can do so much damage with her, particularly with some of the abilities that I didn't show you here that you'll get later on in the game because I didn't want to for spoiler reasons. But as always, if you have other tips for other people playing Maelle out there, or if you have questions about mechanics for Maelle or weapons or any other things, you can leave them in the comments, and I will try and answer them as soon as I can.